Namaskaromi, and welcome everyone to our 5th week in this journey through the traditions of yoga. Now, starting this week, we're going to be traveling back in time to look at the different strands of pre-modern yoga that were eventually brought together and consolidated into a modern yoga by Swami Vivekananda and a bunch of other Indian thinkers back in the 1890s or thereabouts. It's going to be a little bit different kind of journey than we've been doing so far. We'll be encountering ancient ideas, techniques, concepts, and texts in Sanskrit. It's going to be fun, don't worry. But if you do maybe start to lose some of your steam, just take a breath, relax, remember why we're all here. This is a gateway to begin to appreciate the ancient traditions that are lying underneath those yoga classes that you can take in the studios and gyms across Vancouver. And hopefully we'll get a taste of what yoga used to be like in pre-modern India back then and there. It's okay if you can't remember every single detail. To be honest, I can't always do it either, but it's okay. It's normal. Don't stress about it. Do let your mind be free. Let it cling to ideas and names that you find interesting. Don't let go. All right? You can always go back again and learn more. Anyway, for the moment, let's all imagine that our time machine is kind of beaming us back to the year 400 AD. We're just stepping out and into the kind of hustling and bustling city of North India. We notice that over there's a pavilion, there's a large crowd that's gathered. There's two scholars who are passionately debating about some big philosophical topics. Is the material world real? Is it an illusion? Is God real? Is God an illusion? And how can you escape this illusion if it's an illusion? Crowds of scholars are there. They're hanging on every word. The king is there too. It's his job to decide which philosopher is going to win the debate. One of these debaters, as it turns out, comes from a school of philosophy called yoga. This is yoga with a capital Y, the classical philosophical school of yoga. And this week's episode, we're going to be spending some time finding out what this important tradition was all about. In our next segment, we're going to find out what a specific text was about, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. This is a canonical text of the yoga school, something that yoga practitioners today even place a large amount of kind of weight of authority on. So we will take a bit of time to appreciate it, even read some portions of it. So what was yoga philosophy? Yoga with a capital Y, right? Maybe the best way to start talking about it is actually to think about what philosophy itself is, what philosophy was trying to do in ancient India. At its core, philosophy means to use your mental faculties of reason, introspection, intuition, to find out answers to big questions of life. There's kind of three main domains maybe we can think about in terms of philosophical thought. They have fancy Latin names, ontology, epistemology, and soteriology. There's some other ones like phenomenology or metaphysics. Forget about those for now. Let's just talk about ontology, epistemology, and soteriology. Ontology means the knowledge of what exists and what doesn't exist. The biggest ontological question, of course, is kind of always about God. Does God exist or not? And what about me? How exactly do I exist? Do I have a soul that exists, or am I just the body and when it dies, that's it? Right? The second domain is called epistemology, and this basically means to try to figure out, how do we know if something is true or false? How do we know if something is real or fake? How can we verify if a statement is true? We won't be talking actually too much about epistemology this week. I think maybe next week we'll hit on it. We will, however, look today at this third domain called soteriology, which is basically the theory of liberation. The question here is, what does freedom mean? What does it mean to be saved, to be redeemed, to be liberated? Whether it's by a higher power like God or if it's through your own effort. So those are the three main areas that philosophers are philosophizing about in ancient India: ontology, epistemology, soteriology. Philosophy in India had been going on for a long time, actually, since at least 400, 500 BC or so, but it really kind of exploded around 300 AD There's 6 major schools of philosophy you can find at the time that are considered to be Hindu or Brahmanical. These are because they generally accepted the older religious doctrines of the Vedas and they respected the authority of the Brahmin social order. There were non-Hindu Shramana traditions as well, and the most important of these two were, of course, Buddhism and Jainism, which are the 2 other major religions of ancient India. We're going to be looking a little bit more at their role in yoga next week. The 6 Brahmanical schools were called Mimamsa, Vedanta, Samkhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika. Mimamsa, Veda, Samkhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika. If you're interested in Indian philosophy at all, if you want to know more about these 6 schools, it's fascinating. You should definitely take some classes, maybe in our philosophy department at UBC. For now, though, let's say that the Mimamsa school was the kind of older school of Vedic ritual exegesis. They mainly focused on arguing about how and why the old Vedic sacrificial rituals worked. The Vedanta school, on the other hand, was a mystical tradition that tried to find deep connections between the inner self and the Atman and the infinite spirit of the universe, the Brahman that's beyond comprehension. Nyaya was the Indian school of logic. Closely related was the atomist or Vaisheshika school, which proceeded by saying all entities can be reduced to tiny atomic particles, and if we understand how these particles work, then we can understand how the universe works. The other 2 main Hindu schools formed also a kind of closely matched pair, Samkhya and Yoga, with only really 2 major differences between these 2 schools. First, Yoga seems to have had a concept of God, maybe Ishvara, while Samkhya didn't have Ishvara. The second idea is that yoga's path to liberation or freedom involved an embodied process of physical, mental, and spiritual practices like sitting and posture, breathing, meditating, and all that. Samkhya, on the other hand, was it was a path of knowledge where basically you gained enlightenment through thinking rather than doing. In other words, they kind of had 2 different distinct soteriologies, 2 pathways to liberation. In the rest of the segment, let's look at the ontologies that Samkhya and Yoga share, and then the soteriological path that Yoga offers for finding liberation and freedom. Both Samkhya and Yoga we can call dualist philosophies. This means that they see the cosmos as fundamentally divided into 2 domains. First, there's all that stuff that we can see, we can hear, we can taste and touch and smell and think about. This is called prakriti in Sanskrit. We could call it material reality in English, nature sometimes. It's always changing. It's being born, it's dying, it's suffering, it's undergoing what's called the cycle of karma and rebirth. Then there's that singular entity called the spirit, pure consciousness, purusha in Sanskrit, which is something we can't see, we can't hear, we can't taste, touch, smell, we can't even think about it. In fact, this purusha, according to Samkhya, is something that pervades the entire material world of Prakriti. It actually courses right through us. It's found in every single one of us. It's what makes us alive. But it's still beyond our comprehension. Miller explains on page 13, it's through ignorance that this spirit is connected to this world. So in this dualistic model, where these 2 things that exist are the pure spirit and the material nature, Purusha and Prakriti, Samkhya says that we can recognize this material nature in a number of different ways. First, they say that every part of the material world is colored by 3 different qualities, or gunas as they're called in Sanskrit. Miller explains that these are like aspects of energy that are contained within every little material thing in the world. I like to actually think of them as kind of like how colors work, where every color you can make is a combination of red, green, and blue, right? RGB. It's the same way with the 3 qualities or gunas of material reality. In Sanskrit, the gunas are called sattva, rajas, tamas. In English, these are lucidity, passion, dark inertia. Sattva or lucidity is that quality that makes something pure, sacred, blissful. Miller puts it, it's the pure, clear quality of nature's perfection. Rajas, or passion, is that quality that creates energy, motivation. Tamas is the dark inertia that slows things down. That's what makes us lazy, sick, slow, dull. Right? These qualities exist in combination in all material things. Rarely are they ever found in pure form. The gunas are like colors, but on a more substantive level, the material world is also divided into what are called the 24 evolutes, or tattvas. Let's kind of go through these kind of quickly. You can spend all day on them. First, the material things, whether your body, your chair, your computer, they're all made of 5 gross elements: earth, fire, wind, air, and water. Humans and other living beings have also 5 senses: sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell, right? Each of the senses is further two-sided. There's both the sense faculty that's inside us and also the sense perception that's subtly outside of us and it's coming from the object to us. So if you smell a flower, it both involves your nose, but also the smell that the flower is sending to your nose. There's 5 other organs of action called the karmendriyas. These engage the body with the world in other ways. They're like your hands, your feet, your speech, your body waste, your genitals. Right? If you're keeping count so far, that's 20 evolutes, 20 tattvas. That's basically all the physical aspects of the material world. As far as your mental body goes, Samkhya says that this is also part of the material world. We usually don't think of it as being such, right? Mind versus matter, we think of. Your thought process, they say, is made up of 3 different material essences. There's the mind, the manas, which is connected to our senses, which reacts to our senses. If a bear jumps out at us, we get scared. If someone we love calls us, we get happy, right? That sort of thing. And there's also our intellect, our buddhi, that makes rational decisions and choices that are based on various kinds of reasoning that we use. Let's say I decide that I want to be happy when I see the bear and not be scared. That's my buddhi that's talking, right? Then there's our ego, our ahankara, which gives us our sense of self-identity. When I say that I am doing something, I'm invoking my ahankara, my ego. That's the Samkhya ontological framework that yoga borrows and uses. I want to mention 3 things about this. First, it's important to see that your true self, who you truly are, is your spirit, this pure consciousness, purusha. It's the same in all of us, you and me. There's just one purusha in the universe. And it's not the same actually as your ego, which is usually what we think we are, right? We mistake ourselves as being our ego. That's why I think I'm me, you think you are you, and we feel like we're different. It's a mistake. It's not really like that. That's all part of our material self. Our true identity is something else, something transcendent. It's the purusha, but it's deeply entangled with our ego, with our mind, with our intellect. So we can't discern it. The second thing to note is that, and we'll talk more about it next time, is that in yoga, there's one additional thing that exists in the material world called the Ishvara, the Lord, in addition to those 24 evolutes or material tattvas in Samkhya. What's this Ishvara? Who's this Lord? Well, different yoga texts understand Ishvara differently depending on how kind of devotional they are. But basically, we can think of the Ishvara as a kind of projection, maybe, of the Purusha within the material world. The Godhead, some people describe it. Since Purusha is a transcendent entity, there's no way to comprehend the Purusha. Ishvara acts as an immanent, worldly projection of that transcendent. We can perceive it. We can appreciate it. We can merge with it in our efforts to become free. This brings us to the third thing I wanted to point out, which is the difference between Samkhya and Yoga soteriologies, these theories of how to gain freedom. Remember, for both schools, the goal is to extricate the Purusha that's stuck within our material selves and our mind because of our ignorance. Samkhya philosophers say that, the way to solve ignorance is through knowledge, right? As soon as you learn what the material world is really about, then kind of by process of elimination, you can detangle the Purusha from all that material stuff and then let it reach a state of freedom. What about yoga? Well, the yoga school adds a couple of additional twists to the model. First, Miller explains that there's an important concept in yoga called the chitta, the thought. In fact, it's mentioned in the very second sutra of the Patanjali's text. Your chitta, your thought process, is a combination of your mind, ego, and intellect, and it's connected to your senses. According to yoga philosophy, then, what our problem is that our thoughts are always active. They're always doing stuff. In Sanskrit, this is called chitta vritti, the turnings of the mind. It's never still. We're always thinking about something, worried about something, reacting, debating, stressing out, and so on and so forth. Our pure consciousness, though, our purusha, is wrapped up actually inside of our thoughts, inside of our chitta vrittis, which are always in motion. So that's what makes us stuck in the material world. So Miller explains that the goal of yoga is to still that motion and then liberate the subject from the tyranny of the uncontrollable thought. Yogas chitra vritti nirodha. It's just the words of Patanjali, the goal of yoga is to prevent the turning of thought. When this happens, when thought ceases, then our spirit, our purusha, is freed. It stands as the true identity as the observer of the world. We gain that true self-understanding, self-realization that we're not our ego, we're not our mind, we're not our intellect, we're something transcendent from all of that. It's the same in all of us, you and me. Once that happens, we're all free. So the pursuit of that freedom, that liberation, this moksha, this is what is yoga philosophy. Now, how are we supposed to do it? That's where the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali come in. So let's take a break here. When we come back, why don't we walk through some of the basic features of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, read a few of the sutras from the opening section, and then in our live session, let's read more and talk more about this amazing text and see what kind of impressions we're all getting from it.